Oh. Om Satchidanandarupaya Vishvotpattyadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditarataschaarteshvabhignaswarat Tene brahmahridaya adikavaye muhyanti yatsurayah Tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo mrisha Dhamna svena sada nirastakuhakam satyam param dhimahi Dharma projita ketavotra paramo nirmatsaranam satam Vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parerishvaraha Sadyo Hridyavarudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubi Tatchana. Hari Om and greetings from Toronto. Gopya Kamad Bhayat Kamsaha Dveshat Chedyadayo Nripaha Sambandhat Vrishnaya Snehat Yuyam Bhaktya Vayam Vibho. The gopis, out of kama or lust, thought about God. Kamsa, out of bhaya or fear, thought about God. The nripas, that is the wicked kings, out of dvesha or hatred, thought about God. The Vrishnis, that is the family of Bhagavan Krishna, out of sambandha or respect, thought about God. You here is the Pandavas, Raja Yudhishthira, out of sneha or love, thought about God. And I, referring to Rishi Narada, out of prema or reverence, thought about God. As you think, so you develop. Whether you think through hatred or love, whatever you're thinking about, you are going to develop into that. And this is what our course is focusing on. This is a training in thinking. And if you flow with this, you will re-become God. In our last class, we were introduced to one of the most famous aspects of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the Nava Lakshana of Bhakti. And I'm going to review that for you. These 9 rungs take us from being separate from God to being one with God. So rungs we often think of going higher, but I always think of rungs going deeper when it comes to Vedanta or a subjective science. Rung 1, Shravana. Shravana is to input Shastra. It is to read, write, reflect. Next is Kirtana, rung 2, which is to output Shloka. You'll see this ladder is about inputting and outputting. You output shloka, it is to chant more. Because when you chant more, you develop concentration. Rung 3 is smarana, and that is to input sankalpa. As you leave your home to go to school, to go to work, what is the intention behind driving? What is the intention behind interacting with people? Have that sankalpa. Remember why you're doing what you're doing. Rung 4 is sevana, and this is to output sangraha. We should be living in such a way where we're creating welfare, we're creating well-being. And there's no conditions to that I'm only going to do this for this group of people, but not that group of people. Rung 5 is archana, and this is to input sadhana. As one tastes the joy that comes with seva, they don't want this to be limited by place and time or space and time, but they engage in more sadhana, so all they do becomes joyous. The next rung is vandana, and this is to output shila. Shila here means your etiquette, your manners, your behaviors. When we engage in sadhana, we're investing in ourselves, but then this has to be manifest in all that we do. So many of us are sattvic when it comes to mandirs and ashrams, even in satsang. But do you still act the same way when you're by yourself? Do you still think like that when you're tired? That's outputting shila. Next is Dasia, and Dasia is to input shushka. Dasia means to be a servant of a master. And this really means letting go of one's body identification. Shushka means dry. Shushka means tasteless. We should give to this body the minimum required, because this body is on lease. It doesn't belong to us. That's what it means to be a Dasya. The 8th rung is to output, it's Sakya, and this is to output Smriti. Sakya, output Smriti. It is not to be a servant of God, but to be a friend of God. And I'm very much fond of this insight because Sanatana Dharma, our religion, is not fear-based. A greater relationship than being a servant to a master is to be a friend to a master. No. Sakya, output Smriti means to let go of past regrets and future anxieties. To let go of likes and dislikes, because this is letting go of the mind. We're giving up the body, now we're giving up the mind. And where does the mind live? Past, future, likes, dislikes. And finally, the 9th rung, the rung that takes us face to face with our Creator, is Atma. And this is to input Swarupa. Input Swarupa. In the prayers I just chanted, Raja Parikshita asks Rishi Shuka, what should a dying man do? And really the question is, what should a human do? And the answer is to contemplate on your Swarupa. That's the answer that's given in the first verse, and that's what's being shared here too, is to input Swarupa, to feel that you're not the intellect. The intellect and ego are together, to feel that you are, the creation and creator are one. To feel you are divine. All of this is training in Nivedana. Nivedana is to give, to renounce, to surrender. And you have to do this rung by rung. These are all to be practiced serially, not simultaneously. You don't jump from rung 1 to rung 9. We intellectually think that's possible, but it's not possible. This thought is concluded, and then I'll reread this line. Iti pumsarpita Vishnau bhaktischennava lakshana kriyate bhagavat yadha tanmanye uttamam. The divine boy Prahlada says, this is how a pumsa, a human, can arpita, can surrender their ego. This is known as the Navalakshana of Bhakti, the 9 steps, the 9 indicators, the 9 directions of devotion. Kriyate Bhagavat Yadha. If one does this for God, tanmanye dhitam uttamam. In my opinion, based on my analysis, this is the best way anyone can live. So this is a 5-year-old boy explaining this to 50-year-olds, 75-year-olds. It's incredible. And you'll now find out why. Today's class is going to focus not on Hiranyakashipu. We already relate to him. We don't need more details on him. We need more details on Prahlada. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And today's class is special in so many ways, and you'll see why. I'm in the 7th skanda. That's the 7th section of Srimad Bhagavatam. The 8th adhyaya, 8th chapter, the 13th shloka or verse, and I'm reading lines 1 and 2. This is Hiranyakashipu speaking to Prahlada. The earlier verse was Prahlada speaking to his friends. Now this is what Hiranyakashipu says to his son, and you know what he's going to say. Yastvaya mandha bhagyokto madanyo jagadishwaraha kwasau yadisa sarvatra kasmat stambena drishyate. You are speaking like someone who has a poor fate, has an incomplete future. You are stupid. And in your stupidity, you think that Jagadishwara is different than myself. Where is this all-pervasive Jagadishwara? Where is the creator of the multiverse? Show me. I can't see him in this stamba. I can't see him in this pillar. You're all tuned into this. You've heard this before. Okay. But the details you have not heard. So now I'm going to share some of these details. When Prahlada, the divine Prahlada, was sharing with his friends how what our teachers are teaching us is wrong. What our teachers are teaching us will not make us complete. Then Hiranyakashipu asks those teachers, are you teaching my son this? And those 2 teachers say, we have not taught him this. This is natural to him. And for all of you who have been in the course longer, what did I say the focus of the 7th skanda is? Uti. Uti means nature. We've all come in with our own natures, irrespective of context. And that's why in every class I share with all of you, don't depend on context. Don't let disease make you afraid. Don't let other people's compliments and criticisms shake you. We've come with our own nature. And Prahlada is a great example of that, divine Prahlada. During reading week, school breaks, maybe COVID-19 was happening back then too, because now Prahlada, he comes home to his father. And his father asks, what are you learning? Because he sort of believes those teachers, but he questions them too. What are you learning in school? And Prahlada says, anyone who's extrovert will never feel humility, will never feel divinity. One who is an extrovert will always feel that they're the creator, that they are the best, that there's no one higher than them. And this is like a passive-aggressive remark that Prahlada is really describing his father, no? His father's the most extrovert. His father thinks he's the best, he's the creator. And Prahlada is trying to share otherwise. And his father goes to town on him. His father cannot tolerate this. And remember, he's 5 years old. If you can think of a grade 1 student, this is what Hiranyakashipu does to his 5-year-old son. See how extroverted he is? He never feels that Prahlada's close to him, part of him, is him. These are the various ways that Prahlada is tried to be killed, assassinated, with tridents. Hiranyakashipu's guards take their spears and swords and start poking at Prahlada. No effect. Next is they brought in elephants to trample on Prahlada. And they're unable to. That didn't work, so they brought in snakes. And you know there's a lot of poisonous snakes in India. These are not our garden snakes. These are king cobras. No effect. After that is magic. Black magic. Voodoo. They try voodoo on this 5-year-old boy. He's immune to that. After that, they throw him down a mountain. Yesterday I was watching heli-skiing. I don't know, Shuk and I were somewhere, and I was watching people who jump out of a helicopter and ski down a mountain. And I've skied Whistler before, and it's hard. I can only imagine how hard heli-skiing is. I can only imagine how hard falling down a mountain would be. But he was fine. After that, they put Prahlada in prison. After that, they tried to poison that's divine Prahlada. When prison didn't work, poison didn't work, they started to starve him. No food, no water. After that, they exposed him to raging weather. That's the power of these asuras. They could manipulate the weather. After that, they tried to drown him. And finally, what did they try to do? Burn him. And that's the connection we know to Holika. So I'm going to share some thoughts on that, but now let's get into the Vedanta of this katha. So far I've told you a story you're familiar with. Hiranyakashipu is an asura. An asura is someone who has darkness in their mind, so they're ever engaged in wrong thinking. We have darkness in our mind when we are tamasic. We're tired, we're unenthusiastic. An asura is one who believes the body is real and the spirit is an illusion. So by a show of hands, how many asuras do we have in this class? See how happy you are to put your hand up? You should put that in a sense of shame, being sad. We're all, yeah, me. Because you're all thinking, then we're related to Prahlada too. But isn't it amazing how we externalize an asura, but when you know the details of how an asura thinks, then so many of us are asuras. An asura is someone who wants this body to live forever. And that's what Hiranyakashipu prayed for, no? He wanted the boon that he could not die. Now, how this relates to us is people who want to live forever become escapists. They don't embrace the fact that they're going to die. And so when they're escaping, they feel more fear. Today, if you lived a full life with lots of service and lots of studying and lots of cheer, if today was your last day, I think you would embrace death. But if your life is not revolved like this, you've been escaping from what's going to happen from reality, and today is going to be a very scary day, no? These are reality checks for us. Prahlada tells his father, people who escape from death, people who escape from their responsibilities are like cows. When a cow chews grass, how many times does it chew it? I think a cow has 4 stomachs, I think. So it goes into one stomach, comes back out. One stomach, comes back out. It's called masticating, I think. And it becomes cud. He's saying someone who depends on pleasure, possession, position is like a cow because we keep trying different combinations of pleasure, possession, position for peace. But do we ever feel that peace? We're just chewing on cud. So now that you've heard this message, who an asura is, what our dependencies are compared to cud, what are we supposed to do? The message from all of this is we have to reduce our body identification. And one way to do this is choose discomfort. Whenever you have an option to make the body comfortable or uncomfortable, choose to be uncomfortable. And if you can make your mind cheerful because you know this message, you know you are a deva and not an asura, then while you're experiencing discomfort, you'll still be cheerful. Then you realize that you're not this body. If this body doesn't eat tasty food, if this body doesn't wear nice clothes, but you're still happy, then that shows you're not this body, no? Choose discomfort. Have 2 young kids. This will be automatic. Now I want to shift to details on Holika. The last way they tried to kill the divine Prahlada was to burn him. Holika had a boon that she would never be burned out of self-defense. She was not allowed to use this to offend, to harm. But when someone gets riled up, then they forget how to drive, no? When you're angry, are you a better driver or a worse driver? Driving is to take us from point A to point B, not to engage in road rage. So, Prahlada never sat in Holika's lap. You see that visualization. There's an asura woman and she's holding Prahlada. Whose lap was he sitting in? In Bhagwan's lap. He was never sitting in her lap. He was sitting in Bhagwan's lap. And so, he was never burnt, and she was. Now think of this more deeply. Holika was not to be burned, but she got burned because she was holding on to a bhakta or a devotee. For us, the only way we can burn our vasanas is to hold on to the feet, to the hands of a bhakta. That's what, Holika's nature is not to be burned. Our nature is vasanas right now. No. I think I'm this body. I think I'm this mind. But our vasanas can be burned when we hold on to a bhakta. And if you want to connect this back to Bhagavad Gita, remember in chapter 2 when Bhagavan says, for the self, weapons cannot cut it, water cannot wet it, fire cannot burn it. Prahlada knows he's the self, so he can't be burned. Holika doesn't know she's the self, so she can be burned. Okay. So all of this is happening. I'm going to share with you some more insights that Prahlada lives by. He shares with his students, he shares with his father, the typical human will live for 100 years. Now, as I share this timeline, this lifeline, remember that we're not going to live for 100 years. I think the typical human lives for 72 years now. I've shared with all of you, at 60, your only purpose in life should be Bhagwan. By 72, every year over that is a bonus for you. The typical person lives for 100 years. And when they don't have divinity as their purpose, then they succumb to indiscipline. When we don't have a purpose, we become casual. So, out of these 100 years, 50 years are wasted in sleep. Do you agree? Now that you didn't have to drive for class today, how many hours did you sleep? Yes, 50 years in sleep. The next ratio is 25 years are wasted in ignorance. And he specifically says, as a child and as someone in youth. A kid and a teenager and a young adult, they're ignorant in the sense that they feel that everything they're experiencing is real and they don't think about it more. So how many years are left? Only 25 years. So then he fast forwards and says the last 20 years are wasted in pain. So between 80 and 100, what do? You just get older and feel more pain. So 50 years I'm sleeping, 25 years I'm ignorant, last 20 years I'm in pain. How many years remain? There's only 5 years left. And those 5 years are lost in attachment to the people around you, no? That's a really accurate description of how we live. And so Prahlada is telling the people who are with him in the Gurukula, live for the divine. The divine is most easily pleased because the divine is closest to you. No? Who's closer to you? Your son or daughter, your parents, your siblings, your cousin, me? The one who's closest to you is your creator. And the closer someone is, the easier they are to please, no? The farther they are, the harder they are to please. And the divine Prahlada tells all of his fellow students, so be kind. If you want to know what to do with this message, he says, be kind to everyone because the divine doesn't just live in you, but lives in all beings. You've heard this teaching before, be kind. How? How happy do you feel when someone washes your dishes for you? You feel really happy, no? When your roommate or your spouse or if you have a cleaning person. Yes. Being kind is doing someone else's work so they don't have to. That's how you know you're exemplifying kindness, is you're helping someone else. Kindness is really selflessness. It's where you're not concerned about your tiredness. You're not concerned about your mood. You're not concerned about what you're going to do next, but you're thinking about the other person's tiredness, their mood, what they have to do next. Okay? As all of these students are listening to this divine Prahlada, they ask, where did you learn this? You're the same age as us. You're 5 years old. We never learned this. Where did you learn this? And Bhakta Prahlada says, I learned this from Rishi Narada. Where? When? I learned this when I was in my mother's womb. And that's such an important point because these 9 rungs of devotion are so easy to learn and practice that even an infant can do it. Yes? Prahlad learned this when he wasn't even born in a physical way. This is most universal. To be part of the meditation and life course, you have to have some understanding of Vedanta, but to appreciate Bhagavatam, to appreciate Bhakti, this is most universal. And all of these boys, all of these girls, they really are so in tune with Bhakta Prahlada, and they say, where do we begin? And he says, Guru Seva. See, satsang is powerful, but who you're sangaing with determines how powerful you are, no? When Hanumanji is in satsang with Sugriva, how powerful is Hanumanji? When Hanumanji is in satsang with Bhagwan Rama, how powerful is Hanumanji? So the company you keep will determine how strong or weak you are. So he's telling all of his co-students, engage in Guru Seva. Prahlada comes back again home. He just goes to the Gurukula, gets tested, father gets mad, sends him back, gets mad again. So now he's come back again. And his father, in suspicious ways, asking, what did you learn this time? And he chides him saying, did you learn more about my enemy? It's really interesting that the Asuras never take the name of God. Ravana never used the word Rama until he was dying. So here, Hiranyakashipu calls Bhagwan his enemy. And Prahlada says, there is no enemy other than the mind. You have no enemy other than the mind. Now think of the practicality of this. If you're a lusty, jealous, greedy person, don't you suspect the people around you? They're there to steal from you. They're there to be disloyal to you. But if you have no enemies inside, you don't externalize enemies. Ravana's enemy was Bhagwan Rama. Bhagwan Rama did not have Ravana as an enemy. So here's a practice for us. Expose the mind to quietude. If you can expose your mind to quietude, you will realize that there are no enemies outside. You will also realize that there are enemies inside, but you'll fight them then. Our life is quite noisy right now, Sheila and I. And we give each other turns. In this hour, you just go do something for 5 minutes or 15 minutes. Go for a walk. Go lie down. Listen to music. And I'll fight. I'll take on the kids for the hour. And then we'll shift. It's like a tag team, 2 on 2. But they have endless energy. We don't. We're getting older. But there's so much recuperation and healing in the mind being exposed to quietude. Okay, my last section of thoughts. This time when Hiranyakashipu listened to Prahlada, he started fearing his own son. That is a really deep detail. And I feel that with a lot of us, when you're around someone who's more evolved than you, don't you start to feel fear towards them? You feel like, I'm not that sattvic, I'm not that noble. I hope they can't read my negative thoughts. So now Hiranyakashipu is starting to feel how pure, how powerful Prahlada is. And when he finally shares this statement, I can't see your Jagadishwara in this pillar, he takes out his sword. And he charges towards that pillar and hacks at it. And it's almost like his sword bounces back. And that pillar starts to go into self-destruct mode. And who comes out of that pillar? Na bhuta, na bhavishya. A being, a creation that has never been experienced in the past and will never be experienced in the future. Reading the details of how Bhagwan Narasimha's mane was so bright that the sun was lost. We think of a lion's mane like in the movie The Lion King. Yeah, it's shabby and big. But the amount of details that are shared is so inspiring. And he takes that Hiranyakashipu and puts him on his lap. And how lucky Hiranyakashipu is, no? How happy someone is to sit on Santa Claus's lap. And you pay for that, no? How lucky someone is to have sat on Swami Chinmayananda's lap. And here's Hiranyakashipu, who totally doesn't deserve it, but gets to sit on Bhagwan's lap. And then you know the details about it was neither day nor night, nor inside nor outside, nor on the ground, nor in the air. And like butter, He simply opened up Hiranyakashipu. One of the details was he took his intestines and wore it as a mala. Bhagwan at that point was just having fun. And after Hiranyakashipu was torn open, it was like Bhagwan Narasimha was growing. His head reached the roof of that palace, so he started breaking that palace, and no one knew what to do. It was like he was seething with his eyes and his breath. So they all looked to Devi Lakshmi and said, "Go calm him down. He's going to tear us apart." And she said, "I'm out. I've never seen him like this in the past. I'm not going to see him in the future. There's nothing I can do." So they're all smart. Then who did they look to? Bhakta Prahlada. What a spouse can't do, an infant can do, no? How fiery we are with our spouses, with our parents. But when it comes to an infant or child, I'm not saying a teenager. I'm saying it with a 5-year-old. He simply went and sat. Really, he came to Bhagwan, and Bhagwan picked him up and put him on his lap. And then Bhagwan Narasimha asks Prahlada for forgiveness. He said, "Please forgive me for coming too late. You had to go through all of that because of me." And as he's holding Prahlada, he's checking behind his ear and lifting up his dhoti, and he's looking for scars. You know, like when you see an infant or a child fall and you hold them and you check their head, or, "I hope you didn't get hurt." That's how loving Bhagwan is. And now some thoughts that, you don't really think about this till you hear this from a master. I've learned all of this from Swami Tejomayananda. Some commentators say that Prahlada became the successor of Hiranyakashipu. But if you think carefully, where was Bhagwan Narasimha sitting? On the throne. So didn't Prahlada become the successor of Bhagwan and not Hiranyakashipu? See how much love Bhagwan has for Prahlada. And because Prahlada has that love too. And when Hiranyakashipu says, "I can't see your Jagadishvara in this pillar," Prahlada says he's there. Bhagwan will do anything and everything to support a bhakta. Did he have to be manifest in a pillar? This inert, dead material. But he did it just to confirm what a bhakta says. What someone who loves God says, God will succumb to that love. Do you love Bhagwan more now? Do you love Bhakta Prahlad more? Many commentators, many speakers, when they engage in a Bhagavata Saptaha, they have marks that on day 1 you should finish here, day 2 you should finish here. In a typical Bhagavata Saptaha, 3 discourses, 90 minutes each, that puts you at 4.5 hours, yes? So, on day 1, you're supposed to complete Bhagwan Varaha's Avatara. For all of you in this course, you know how many hours it took us to reach Bhagwan Varaha? 10 hours of discourse and 10 hours of discussion. Whatever is great in life, you have to move through that slowly. When you're eating really tasty ice cream, don't you eat it slowly? When you are interacting with someone whom you respect and love, don't you want to be with them more? When you go to a concert, don't you want that band to play on and on and on and on and on? Yes? So I wanted to share that aspect of Srimad Bhagavatam. These details are divine. Oh.